Story 1. First, this may sound obvious, but focus on earning more money. Try to move up in your current job or get education that will change your career. I know this is not easy and some luck is involved, but if you work a low-wage job with no advancement options, consider trade school or an apprenticeship. Second, saving money helped me a great deal. When I receive my paycheck, I automatically put $50 into savings and do not touch it unless there is a real emergency. Story 2. My company went under and I stopped getting paychecks. I am no longer living paycheck to paycheck. Story 3. My wife died. Life and mortgage insurance made me instantly wealthy. I do not recommend this as a means of financial security, though. Story 4. Do not finance items that depreciate. Treat credit cards as dangerous items. Story 5. My husband moved in and pays half the bills. We have no children. Story 6. I take only cash to the shops. If I decide to spend £20 at the grocery shop, I carry only that amount. It forces me to pay strict attention to what I buy, and I cannot rationalize going over my budget by saying it is only a couple of pounds. Story 7. I taught myself to be content with less while I aggressively paid off debt. Story 8. I grew up dirt poor, showering at the park and spending winters without heat, and now make six figures, so I feel comfortable chiming in. There is no single thing. This is a multifaceted issue. Changing one thing, like your job, will not help if you do not also change your spending habits. 1. Getting out of the food service industry and into an office. I immediately got health insurance, consistent full-time pay rather than unreliable hours, access to a 401k retirement plan, and opportunities for advancement. This was just as a receptionist. 2. Never living beyond my means. I never have credit card debt, I do not have a car loan, I never buy the newest phone or gadget, and I very infrequently go on vacations. Growing up poor probably did not give me a taste for these things anyway, so I truly do not feel like I am lacking in any way. 3. Using credit cards wisely. As mentioned above, I never put anything on them I do not already have the money for. I use them for groceries, gas, bills, clothing, and so on, and earn rewards points. I get about $450 back every year in cash rewards. My credit score is in the 800s. 4. Choosing the right partner is often underrated. Everything in life is easier when you are a team, especially when your partner is also financially savvy and has the same life and savings goals. Being able to split rent, utilities, car insurance, and other expenses is a game changer. But it is not an excuse to commit to the first person you meet. The wrong partner can cause even worse damage than if you were alone. Choose wisely. Story 9. Once I cut out the avocado toast and Starbucks coffee, it was smooth sailing. Story 10. I stopped buying stupid things I do not need and got a much better job. Story 11. I invest a large portion directly into my 401k retirement account. It is easier to reduce spending when you cannot access the money. It is too easy to splurge and say that you will save next month. Story 12. President Obama said he was going to raise the salary exemption threshold to above my salary, and the company relied on our exempt status to function. Our company panicked and redid our wage scales. The threshold did not actually end up being raised at that time, but the company knew it would be difficult to lower our salaries later. It really changed a lot for me overnight. Story 13. I am making more money than I was before. You need a good budget, but you cannot out-budget insufficient cash flow. Story 14. I stopped carrying and using credit cards, paid them down until I could transfer the balances to the lowest interest rate, and canceled the rest. I wrote a budget and stuck to it. I trained myself to cut out frivolous luxuries, which I had justified as rewards for my toil, but those rewards were holding me back financially as lifestyle creep set in. Story 15. Moving in with my partner and becoming a two-income household. Story 16. Exercise and meditation. Once I started, I went out less and ate in more often. The savings started adding up shortly after. Story 17. Paying myself first. I started budgeting with a savings target instead of saving whatever was left at the end of the month. Story 18. Do not carry revolving debt balances. Take calculated risks to improve your salary and avoid becoming complacent in your job. Story 19. Income and expenses. Assets and liabilities. Just be aware of them. Focus on increasing income and lowering expenses. Minimize your liabilities. Yes, it is elementary, but it is true. Thanks, Robert K. Story 20. Getting a car changed everything. I was suddenly able to take jobs far from bus lines, make deliveries for Uber Eats and similar services for extra cash, and no longer spend the whole day running errands. The car has cost a fortune, but it has also generated a fortune. Story 21. Back in the day, I moved in with my soon-to-be wife and we combined finances. That dual income, no kids lifestyle was great while it lasted. Story 22. Budgeting and stabilizing income and bills. I do not have a strict budget, but recognizing that this hobby will cost approximately XX dollars for the year, I need to plan for that. I will set aside savings as part of the budget. Story 23. I started making more money than I was spending. Story 24. I honestly never lost the "can I really afford this?" attitude and avoided debt at all costs. I grew up upper middle class. My dad was laid off in his late 50s and did not find a job for 6 years. Our house went into foreclosure. He and I started a business. Very lean times. We were audited by the Internal Revenue Service because they did not believe all the travel expenses. We were claiming since we had no hotel bills. The audit ended when we told them I had been sleeping in the bed of my old diesel truck to save money. During those times I learned to avoid debt like the plague, only buy things when we really needed them and always compare prices. Story 25. Getting married more than doubled household income. Story 26. The old-fashioned way. The in-laws passed away and my husband inherited. Story 27. I received generous pay increases over the years. It is rare, I know, but sometimes it happens. Story 28. Owning an older car for much of my youth helped me save a lot. I invested the money. Story 29. I finally have an emergency fund that can cover 3 months of unemployment. Note that 6 months is now the new normal for that fund. Story 30. Spend less than you earn. Earn more. Gamify saving. Once I had a good foundation, I decided to live a little. It's nice not having to look at prices when I shop for food. Story 31. I got a job that paid significantly more than I had been earning. Story 32. An inheritance was the only way we got ourselves out of debt. Now we are finally able to save money each month. Story 33. I closed all of my credit cards from ages 25 to 33 and taught myself that if I cannot afford something with cash, I cannot afford it, period. I now have cards only to get rewards, and I have never charged anything I cannot pay off immediately. I live within my means. Nothing I buy, whether a house or a car, is a stretch. It is well within my budget and ability even if I were to go backwards. Many of my peers drive expensive cars or have luxurious houses, yet they still live paycheck to paycheck. I will never go back to that life if I can help it. Story 34. Budgeting for more than just my bills was a game changer for me. I put a little money away every month into different funds such as clothing, household maintenance, vacations, and savings. I do not touch savings unless it is a big emergency. Seeing the big picture helped me understand what it takes to fund my lifestyle, not just my bills. Story 35. Honestly, making more money is easier said than done. I know investing in a degree or graduate studies takes time and money, but it is great to have everything on automatic payments and not have to worry or even remember when your paychecks will arrive. Story 36. Pay off your credit cards as fast as you can. It will probably take a long time, but stick with it. Then do not use them. Story 37. Understand the difference between wants and needs and maintain a strict budget. Any salary increase goes into savings or an emergency fund. I worked a lot of overtime to fund a 4-year degree completed part-time. It took longer than 4 years but helped me earn a promotion. It was hard work. Consistency is key. Story 38. My children grew up, my landlord has not raised the rent, and I received a few raises. Story 39. It was more than just one thing. Getting a much better job with much bigger paychecks was just the start. Our children aged out of school-age support. I had to move to accept that better job, and my wife and I lived apart for several years until she could transfer. We also paid off all debt except a small mortgage, and we saved and invested the increase in earnings instead of spending it. No expensive cars, no coffee shops, no restaurants. From start to finish, it took 15 years. We began with $80,000 in car and credit card debt and paid it to zero in 3 years. Then we invested $35,000 per year for 12 more years. We both worked a lot of overtime and ended up with higher than average Social Security benefits, small government pensions, and solid individual retirement accounts. Story 40. One day I saw a message that said all that clutter used to be money. I was sitting in my living room, looked around, and realized how much money I used to spend at stores like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and similar places. Changed my life, and from that point forward I stopped buying things. Story 41. We paid off the house and were surprised at how much money remained at the end of the month. Story 42. For me, the most important change was changing jobs. I was barely scraping by and kept my eyes open for new positions in my company. I talked to several people in the department I wanted to join, so they knew I was interested. The position required some testing, and everyone in the department had to go through it. Because I had signed up for the test and they knew I was interested, I was invited to a cram session with seasoned veterans before the test, which allowed me to ask many questions. I ended up getting the job, and I have been ahead of the game ever since. Story 43. A lifetime of denying myself expensive vacations and not buying clothes, shoes, and bags like most women has made my life much easier. I drove my car for 20 years and paid cash for a used car. Many Americans are underpaid for the value they bring to the workforce. I am amazed that anyone has the will to get out of bed in the morning. Story 44. I have added several additional sources of income. I know that it is not easy to do, but I now earn money from a dozen sources. Story 45. In Canada, I filed for consumer protection. Took 5 years, but I paid off my debt, rebuilt my credit, and now, 2 years later, I have a healthy amount in savings. I can buy things I want, not just things I need. A requirement of the consumer protection process was taking budgeting courses. Now I budget my money and manage it wisely. Story 46. Live in a country where you can support yourself comfortably on the minimum wage. Story 47. I left a job I enjoyed and switched careers to something that actually paid my bills. Story 48. It was a combination of things all at once. My girlfriend, who is now my wife, bought a house and I moved in. We split the bills. I sold my condominium and paid off my car with the profits. Splitting living costs and eliminating the car payment was enough to go from very little wiggle room to being pretty comfortable. Story 49. I got a higher paying job that requires so much mandatory overtime that I do not have time to spend the extra money. Story 50. I changed fields, going from working in an office barely making $60,000 after 8 years to making over $100,000 in construction in 3 years. My job is not easy, but it is not as hard on the body as other trade jobs. Story 51. The kids grew up, got good jobs, and are self-supporting. The primary mortgage has also been paid off. Story 52. I declared bankruptcy. I cannot continue to struggle to survive when all my assets are gone. Story 53. I changed jobs. My previous job was great and I loved my boss, but he ran a small 2-person information technology managed service provider where I was the other person. I started a new job and received a 126% pay raise. Story 54. In 1991, a gifted and talented elementary school teacher taught me basic computer programming. In 1997 and 1998, as a teenage nerd, I started experimenting with Linux. 20 years later, when I got sober and had to turn my whole life around, I had an income-relevant skill to fall back on. Story 55. Getting a second part-time job allowed me to take care of essential needs, eliminate debt, save a little, and ultimately led me to a better full-time job. Nothing beats making more money to solve a lack of funds. You just have to leave before you burn out. Story 56. An offer for a lucrative short-term contract job this year, combined with my day job approving a leave of absence and my wife's willingness to manage the home while I was away, made it possible. It was not an extraordinary amount for that type of work, but it was enough to get me over the hump of the debt from a divorce 12 years earlier and to finally put me ahead. All because I happened to be mindlessly scrolling Facebook one day. Story 57. Career growth. I earn much more than when I was living paycheck to paycheck. Story 58. I am just not living paycheck to paycheck now. It took downloading a budgeting app, I use Rocket Money, to take a hard look at what I was spending. And once I saw how much I was spending each month, particularly on dining out, I started making changes. At first, the changes were very small, but now I am living comfortably, and sometimes it even slips my mind that it is payday. I also set every bill I have, no matter how small, to automatic payment. That way I never miss a payment, and once the bills are paid, the money I have left can be divided as needed. Story 59. The first thing we did was write down every penny we spent for a month. We did not realize it, but convenience store stops add up, and this helped us stop unnecessary spending. We also put more money into our savings and increased the amounts contributed to our pensions and 401k retirement plan. 10 years later, I am retired and life is good. Story 60. I became a journeyman and quit smoking a month later. I started earning significantly more and spending much less. I met my wife a year later. Now we have a dual income and no children. Although we are not rich, we are very comfortable. Story 61. I moved from public to private sector work. I cashed out my public sector retirement earnings and paid off all credit card debt. Not having to pay hundreds of dollars in credit card interest each month gave me breathing room in my budget and relieved my constant financial stress. I may regret that decision if I ever actually retire, but living under constant stress is not a recipe for a good life. Story 62. 1. I followed a strict budget. I bulk cooked at home and tracked everything. 2. I worked hard to make sure whatever I put in my savings account stayed there. No transferring $30 here or $15 there for dinner out. The money stays until it is needed for a specific purpose. For example, I put half of my larger bills aside so I do not feel anxious about paying them. I now have over $1,000 in dedicated savings. No bill money mixed in, just savings I could spend without stressing my budget. I live alone. I have no children, only a cat. 3. I have set treats. I play Genshin Impact and made sure I have $20 for the game every 6 weeks. This keeps my battle pass paid and a Welkin Moon active. It gives me an affordable, predictable level of luxury. I do not feel deprived, so I do not overspend. 4. I stayed at my job. It is stable because it provides something everyone needs. My paycheck has had time to build. I may not be in luxury, but I can afford to be on my own. I am switching departments in the next few months, but I was able to weather COVID-19, coronavirus disease 2019, and this year's wave of layoffs because I stayed put. I will admit this involved luck. I live in a state with a lower cost of living, so smaller raises affect me less. 5. I gave up the Facebook-level luxury. I stopped watching videos of people spending and convincing me I need things to live in luxury. I am happier now. I do not like cooking dinner, so bulk cooking a few different meals to last me is fine. That frees money for other things. I do not want to travel every year. That sounds exhausting. I will go somewhere once every few years if I want to. Not keeping up with the Joneses and taking a few hours once a month for tasks like cooking makes me much happier. Story 63. Living within your means requires strict budgeting and knowing where your money is going. I still struggle with that from time to time. It baffles me that people spend on frivolous things without knowing how much money they have. Story 64. When I got my first raise, my aunt told me to act like I did not and put the difference into savings. I treat my budget as if I am living paycheck to paycheck and move the rest to savings and investments. It is easy to let your lifestyle grow with your income, so this practice helps you avoid that trap. Story 65. For me, it was switching to You Need a Budget, an envelope-style personal budgeting system, and sticking with it. It transformed my personal finances in ways I can only begin to describe. I started in January 2022, and by January 2023, I had paid off my student loans. In August 2023, I bought my first house. In June 2024, I was completely out of credit card debt. During this time, my salary gradually grew from $47,000 to $51,000. It was not easy and still is not, but I would call it comfortable. On a single $56,000 salary, I have been able to save a bit while making major improvements to the house and staying out of debt. I am able to do much more with my money than before. I even went on vacation in 2022 and 2025 without going into any debt. Story 66. I fell into this job because of a chain of events in my life. A friend of a friend was the chief executive officer of a medical software company and was looking to hire technical support. I had previously worked for Apple in phone support and repairs, and before that on personal computers. He was the best boss I have ever had, friendly, grateful, and hilarious. He deserves to be rich. He is one of the few people I respect. 7 years later, I write software documentation and develop the main website, not the web application, and I help the support team when they have questions. It is extremely rewarding to help healthcare professionals. Life is good now, but it has not always been. To summarize, a little bit of knowledge and a lot of luck. Story 67. I graduated college with a bachelor's degree in music performance. I had a significant scholarship, but I knew I was not good enough to win an audition with a professional orchestra. I joined the United States Marine Corps as an officer because my bachelor's degree qualified me to do so. I have not lived paycheck to paycheck since May 11, 1995. I served in uniform for only 10 years. The experience, the 3 master's degrees I earned on the military's dime, and my veteran status helped open professional doors for me as a civilian. Story 68. A family member sold an apartment I had rented for 7 years and split the profit with me. Having a 5-figure buffer in the bank, being able to go to the doctor when needed or buy a round of drinks without checking my account first, is such a different way of living. To be clear, making money from real estate can be ethically dodgy, but credit to my family member, rewarding the people who actually help pay off a mortgage on a house is how it's meant to be. Story 69. My landlord has not raised my rent in the last 10 years. While I have advanced in the company and now make nearly twice as much. Story 70. My family lived paycheck to paycheck growing up, and for years we had no income at all. When I got a job, I did not want that life, so I lived very frugally. I was paid $10 an hour and had a 3-hour daily commute by public transportation. I had no car, no takeout food, and my entertainment was almost exclusively video games, which offered the best dollar per hour entertainment value. I had a cat, which is much cheaper than a dog. I was able to save a fair amount. As I got better jobs, promotions, and raises, I raised my standard of living but kept spending at a level that allowed me to go long periods without working. If you have a large financial buffer, you can be selective when looking for your next job. When things went sour, either because I had to quit due to a toxic work environment or because I was affected by layoffs, I could hold out for better paying roles than I would have if I had to take whatever came my way. This creates a multiplicative effect. You get a larger boost each time you switch jobs than others do. I had to climb my way up, but there was some privilege involved. I was fairly healthy for most of my life. I do not have children. I eventually found a partner who is good with money and frugal, and my industry is doing much better than it was in the 1980s or 1990s, so I no longer make $10 an hour. That is how I did it in the first decade. What I wish I had done was become financially savvy sooner. Even modest investments instead of a low-interest savings account compound significantly over the years. I was in my mid to late 30s when I began investing. Better late than never, but I can only imagine how much more I would have had if I had put aside a little money in a brokerage account when I started my first job in my late teens. Story 71. You need a budget has made all the difference. The app takes some getting used to, but it has completely revolutionized my relationship with money. Story 72. Having more income than expenses. My wife and I are both very debt conscious and not materialistic. We both drive our cars until they are worn out, usually well over 175,000 miles and 12 or more years. No car payments and cheap insurance because they do not have as much value. We do not wear designer clothes. She has bought 2 handbags in the 14 years we have been together. All the little things add up. On top of that, I have invested aggressively with the extra money each month. Do that for a decade or more and, with some luck avoiding major health issues in the family, we are financially secure. It is easy to fall into the trap of thinking it is only $10. Those little thoughtless expenses can ruin you. Story 73. Learning to budget and to distinguish needs from wants. I created an emergency fund so I could stop using credit cards. I paid off my debts from smallest to largest and paid off my car loan early. We rent by choice because the Southern California housing market is too expensive for me to consider buying, and we have been completely debt-free for 10 years. Story 74. I recognize that I am an impulse buyer. If I see something that makes me say, ooh, I'd buy it and add it to the pile of stuff I do not need. Now I add the item to a wish list, which gives me a small dopamine hit. 90% of the time, by the time I get around to buying it, I realize I do not actually want it. It is surprising how much money I have saved and put to better use. Story 75. Getting rid of debt is like giving yourself a raise. Working from home is a very close second. And you bet they hate that. Story 76. We earn a decent wage, but it is still not easy. We do not spend more than we earn and pay off debt as soon as possible. The hard part is earning a livable wage these days. Story 77. Work and live frugally until you build an emergency fund. Once you no longer have to avoid late fees, life becomes much less expensive. Story 78. I am moving into my dad's spare bedroom after my divorce. I cannot afford my own place yet, but I am able to build savings while I recover. Story 79. Pure luck. A man I knew 30 years ago saw a Facebook post I made about a pet passion project. That led to an unlikely connection for a job. His assistant, a few years later, had a different project and called me mainly because she misremembered what I had done for her former boss. That turned into a long-term, large contract. Story 80. I had a previous career writing software, and there were some good payouts I could not accept without compromising my personal values. Story 81. Real estate. I bought in when I could at a time when things looked grim. Investing became the only way I could truly be free and not worry about my finances. It is not the same environment anymore, unfortunately. Story 82. I ran my finances like a for-profit company. I looked at the return on investment of everything I spent money on. During 10 years of living paycheck to paycheck, I insulated the house, upgraded appliances and windows, installed solar panels, bought an electric vehicle, set up a good coffee and tea station and a home theater, upgraded the kitchen and bathrooms, and replaced most of my belongings with buy-for-life items. Every time I freed up cash flow from one area, I redirected it to the next recurring expense. As a result, I no longer need to buy things or leave the house for good food and entertainment. Suddenly, I have half of my fairly small paycheck left over. Story 83. I became obsessive about living frugally. I am not recommending it, but that practice and investing took me from being extremely poor to becoming a multimillionaire. Story 84. I took an obscenely underpaid position for the responsibility and authority granted to me over a multimillion-dollar company. I used my marketing degree to get my foot in the door at a large automotive group and taught myself to apply basic marketing concepts to an industry I had never worked in and had not done marketing in since earning my degree. 5 years later, that on-the-job, drinking from a fire hose training enabled me to get virtually any position I wanted in automotive marketing. People recruit me now. I don't have to submit applications, and my pay went from $50,000 to the high six figures almost instantly. I firmly believe that if I had not taken a position that paid $50,000 a year when it should have paid closer to $200,000 a year, I would not be in the position I am today. Story 85. Stop chasing the Hamptons. Who the fuck cares what car you drive or what house you own? Avoid financing purchases unless they make financial sense. Stay within your spending limits and be content with what you have. There will always be newer, not necessarily better things that come out every year, and you do not need any of them. Story 86. Paid off debt and avoided taking on new debt. Eliminated unnecessary spending. Story 87. A budget that contains every dime you have and shows where you can spend it. It is the easiest way to find extra money. Story 88. I paid off my student loans and eventually received a salary comparable to what I had been promised with the degree. I am now nearly too old to have children. I might be able to retire when my parents pass away, and I will likely die alone and bitter. Story 89. I am making more money and spending the same. I would be retired if I had invested more in company stock back in the day. But I am doing okay now. Story 90. I went to work one day and decided I did not want to do that forever. Retirement requires saving. Story 91. Getting out of debt and then earning 4 to 5 times what I need to live. Story 92. I served 22 years in the United States Army. After retirement, I adjusted my bills to fit my retirement income and budgeted everything. Then I got a job. My working income is now for my hobbies and charity work. Story 93. Paying off all my debt and living within or below my means. Story 94. Becoming debt-free. A consumer proposal saved me. I had already taken a second job, lived below my means, and taken some financial literacy classes, but it wasn't enough to get out from under the interest payments that were crushing me. The consumer proposal stopped the interest charges and consolidated the debt into a payment I could handle based on my income. It was a tough few years, but it also helped me rebuild my credit and develop better habits. Story 95. My budgeting plan is very strict, and it helps that I often receive tips at work. I am a server, so I am able to distribute set amounts of money into a savings binder. I organize the days I work with purchases I will need to make down the road. I set aside money for mortgage, bills, and groceries. I even set aside a little fun money because it helps to incentivize myself. It also helps not to constantly go to the bank to deposit the rest of my cash. I am less inclined to spend it on online shopping, Uber Eats, or other services. My fun money accumulates throughout the month, and then I deposit it. After my bills are paid, I do not really feel inclined to spend more money, so the fun money eventually starts to sit. I might get an occasional coffee, but it still does not take much away from what I have collected. I have only been working at this place since the end of July. I am so thankful. Story 96. Instead of spending 100% of my paycheck every pay period, I tried to spend only 95%. After 20 weeks, I had a whole paycheck saved in my account. I concentrated on reducing my monthly bills, canceling subscriptions I did not use or need, and paying down debt so less of my income disappeared to principal and interest. I used the debt waterfall method, listing all my creditors and their interest rates, and paid the highest rate first, then the next, and so on. Suddenly, I had much more expendable income, which accelerated my savings and the pace at which I could pay down the remaining debt. Then I looked for other ways to cut monthly expenses. I got a different car for commuting to save on fuel, insurance, and maintenance. I started waiting until I got home to eat dinner instead of spending $20 at a drive-thru on the way back. I examined every daily, weekly, and monthly expense and found creative ways to reduce them. It all adds up quickly. By my estimate, I saved about $2,000 a month just by changing my daily driver, eating at home more, canceling and used subscriptions, and making other small changes. I have received several raises at work in recent years, which helped significantly. It is easier to be a valuable employee when you do not have severe money problems. When you are constantly short of money, you can become resentful of your job and feel like your work is for nothing, which makes it much harder to perform well and earn more. Having a financial cushion also lets you take bigger career risks, such as changing jobs for higher pay that might not work out. When you urgently need money and cannot afford to lose even one day of pay, you tend to take the safest path, avoid asking for raises, and avoid making ultimatums because you cannot risk being called on your bluff. Nowadays, I do not worry as much about when payday is, and it is liberating. If my company told me tomorrow that they were out of money and needed to delay my pay for 2 months, I would accept it. If they closed their doors, I would go home, have a beer, and browse job listings without being in a huge rush to find a new one. Story 97. Pursue education, including apprenticeships. Choose a program with a clear career path in mind, not just something you think is cool. Paying attention in high school and focusing on learning is beneficial. No one can ever take away your education. Story 98. Budget. A big part of this was stopping caring what other people thought of me. I was renting a room in a house with 3 other men, and 2 of them lived paycheck to paycheck like I did. They would always have almost no money by the next paycheck because they cared about what others thought. Unnecessarily expensive clothing and shoes, the newest phone all the time, random new items that were not functional for their beater vehicles, and buying bottles at the bar or club. I never had a lot, but I always had a little because I switched to prepaid phone service. I live in a major city but understand that in very rural areas prepaid service may be poor. I started getting my clothes from Goodwill, Ross, and Marshalls. Then, as others have said, I started making more money. The important thing is I had that budget mentality ingrained, so when my income increased, I was able to put a huge amount into the bank. It took 2 years before I moved out and got my own place, but I kept the prepaid service and continued buying secondhand and discounted clothes. After 6 years at that job, I was laid off, but I had saved so much that I took a year off to relax and it barely dented my savings. Make and keep a budget. When you start making more money, act like you are making the same amount you were when you were living paycheck to paycheck for a while. If it is a big jump, it is okay to celebrate and treat yourself once, but avoid financing a new car or taking on payments. It is fine to splurge occasionally when you can truly afford it. Story 99. Literally the weather. Mother Nature came in and saved my year. Story 100. I pay off all my credit cards, save any extra money, and remain calm when unexpected expenses occur. I pay cash for everything and do not charge anything I cannot pay off within 2 months. Story 101. I don't think I've been living paycheck to paycheck for a while because I contribute at least up to the employer match, and I put 10% into my employee stock purchase plan. So, my budget is about 82% of my take-home income, but pretty much all of that 82% gets spent. Although I usually have a buffer of about 2 months' expenses, an unexpected expense can quickly eliminate that buffer. I think mostly it's because I tracked my raises over time. If my average raise over 10 years was less than 3%, I made a rule to ask for a raise or look for new work. I don't think it ever was less than 3%, but when it got close I would move to earn more. Also, owning a home helps because my mortgage is from 2009. If I had to buy a similar home in 2023, my payment would be much higher. Story 102. Switching to the trades was the best decision I have ever made for my finances. Employers are desperate for workers, competition is weak, and the work is virtually recession-proof. Finding a union position after cutting my teeth was also great, though I would be lying if I said I planned it that way. At the time, I was looking for a raise of any kind and lucked into a union shop. The pay increase was $10 an hour, and the union has ensured I am always getting raises without the shady performance review process. Story 103. Pay off debt. Fanatically avoid taking on new debt. Do not change your lifestyle when your salary increases. Story 104. I received promotions at work and did not let my lifestyle creep up as my income increased. I live below my means and save aggressively, so I am no longer living paycheck to paycheck. Story 105. Having your money make money for you is powerful. A high-interest savings account and stock dividends, even a couple $100s a month, really add up. Being able to max out contributions to my Roth individual retirement account also helps. I was living paycheck to paycheck a year ago, and I am still building this. Story 106. Simple truths like these appear across subjects. I am a former Wall Street Journal personal finance writer who got tired of writing the same material over and over, so I put the information together in one place. Overall, the best thing to do is earn more money. There is a minimum scale to life, and many random events that can set you back financially, for example car or health problems, are less impactful when you have more cash flow. How you earn more money is the key. For most people below a certain wealth threshold, passive income is not realistic. For example, you need $1 million sitting in a bank to generate about $40,000 a year in passive income with low risk, whether through a 4% withdrawal from stocks or a 4% interest in money market accounts. Realistically, until you are wealthy, you cannot make a meaningful amount of current income from passive sources. Passive income is usually retirement income. So how do you earn more active income? Ultimately, by investing in your human capital to increase your income earning potential. The good news is that investing in human capital also compounds, often at a higher rate. That can include self-directed learning, accreditation or certification, formal, higher education, committing to a high-growth field, starting a side business that accelerates learning, or participating in a concentrated learning or mentoring program. Avoid labeling it formally as mentorship. Instead, Seek people 5 to 10 years ahead of you who can share practical tips. Story 107. I did something really stupid. In 2017, I invested my entire net worth in Apple stock. It then rose 4 times. Although it was an unacceptably high risk, it paid off and allowed me to retire early. I have since diversified my portfolio but still hold about 10% in Apple and about 15% in Nvidia. Story 108. I will max out tax-advantaged accounts such as individual retirement account, health savings account, and 401k plan, even if it means current pain and skipping leisure expenses. I will ease up once I am past the midpoint of my desired net worth for retirement. Story 109. Making 4 times what I did when I was living paycheck to paycheck has helped immensely. Story 110. Honestly, I started going to the gym regularly. Low self-esteem and self-confidence were the main things holding me back. I trained for powerlifting, and testing myself week after week gave me the confidence I lacked to go back to school and earn a degree in information technology at age 38. Having a degree and going into interviews physically fit and confident made it easier to get a job. I think back to how shy I used to be and to all the public speaking I do now, such as meetings and demos, and I would have flopped if I were still that timid. Story 111. During the pandemic, I worked so many hours at the United States Postal Service that I paid off all my debts, got well ahead on my bills, and learned to budget better. Story 112. My mother died, and I received a modest inheritance. Together with scholarships and in-state tuition, it was enough to avoid student loans and to make a down payment on a house when the market was in my favor. Story 113. Living below your means is obvious, and it helps tremendously. Story 114. For me, it meant treating $1,000 as if it were zero in my bank account. I received a tax refund and saved part of it with the mindset that if my balance dropped below $1,000, I would be in the negative, so I avoided purchases that would bring me below that level. The exact amount has shifted over the years, but I keep the same mentality so I have cash available for emergencies. Getting raises and earning more help too, but that early habit made the biggest difference. Story 115. I married someone with better financial habits and began treating my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 116. Getting one paycheck ahead took me a while. It was hard, and it completely changed my attitude about spending because I knew how hard it had been to get there, and because I was free from the stress of not having enough money for the month. It felt so good that I kept saving. A portion of every raise, half or more of any bonus, and even a Christmas check from my grandmother all went into savings. Once saving became a habit, it started to feel like I was rewarding myself. Story 117. I received military retirement and disability. It was difficult for 21 years, but now I have a career I love. I can retire whenever I choose, whether at 55 or 85. I also budget wisely, do not have much debt, and have a reasonable amount of investments and savings. Story 118. Job hopping can pay off. A typical annual raise is about 5%. A new job can easily get you a 15 to 20% pay increase. If you do that 2 to 3 times over about 5 years, you can quickly be earning significantly more. It is also easier to ask for what you want in a job search while you are still employed than when you are not and urgently need a paycheck. Story 119. I get jobs with higher salaries and do not spend all I earn. There really is no secret to it. Story 120. I was injured at work and was able to save most of my retroactive pay. I would not wish it on anyone. Story 121. Paid off my debt except the mortgage and resolved never to use debt again to pay for purchases. I started saving right away for the next car with automatic withdrawals to a second account. Story 122. I now make about twice what I used to. We are a dual-income married couple. 2 of our 3 children are not at home, so our grocery bill went from $25,000 per year to about $10,000 per year. Story 123. When my wife and I bought a house around 2012, we paid $160,000 while earning about $55,000 combined. We still live in the same house, and my wife now earns $170,000 on her own. Story 124. I had a side hustle until it became a full-time business. Now I live from invoice to invoice. Story 125. Maintain a strict budget until all or as much as possible of your debt is paid off and live within your means. People often say to earn more, but if you lack discipline and financial literacy, you can live paycheck to paycheck whether you earn $75,000 or $250,000. Story 126. Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. I have been downvoted like crazy before for this answer, but it works if you work it. Story 127. After we paid off all our debt of $55,000, we redirected the same monthly payment to savings. Story 128. Remember to pay yourself first. Take care of your financial future by having money automatically taken out of your paycheck before it goes into your bank account. The amount does not matter. You are building the habit of saving. Instead of spending what's left after paying bills, set up an automatic transfer of, for example, $25 per paycheck or even less, into a separate savings account and only withdraw for emergencies. The amount can be small. The goal is the habit. This helps in two ways. First, you avoid the mental debate about spending because money has already been set aside. Second, the money will grow over time. When you receive a raise, a step increase, a promotion, or a cost of living adjustment, increase the amount you save by a percentage or a fixed dollar amount. You will not miss what you never had. Pay yourself first with money you will not miss because you never had it before. Story 129. The settlement money, laughing out loud, was for a wrongful death, so it felt like both a curse and a blessing. Story 130. Not buying things brand new is a big one. Check if you can find used items online or at a thrift store. It is amazing how inexpensive things can be. Story 131. Track income and fixed costs and write them down. Eliminate unnecessary expenses, pay down debt, and make temporary sacrifices to build an emergency fund. Invest and pay yourself before non-essential expenses. Increase income. Repeat these steps regularly. Story 132. No debt for any reason. If you can afford to pay cash, then you cannot afford it. The only exception is a mortgage. Story 133. I stopped spending frivolously, invested in appreciating assets, and set a strict budget. Story 134. Before making any major purchase, ask yourself whether you really need it or just want it. Story 135. I am making more money, but I live as if I were still being paid less. Story 136. My wife and I got very lucky with the housing market and were able to get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a $727 mortgage. We bring home about $5,450 combined after taxes, and after all bills we have about $2,600 a month left. Story 137. Divorce. It's a lot easier to support myself on my paycheck than to support a lazy person who refuses to get a job. Story 138. Set up weekly automatic deposits into a savings account. Story 139. Changing jobs for higher pay is the only thing that actually worked for me. I changed jobs 3 times in 5 years and increased my salary by 155%. My monthly bills over the same period went up by 200%, but overall I am now able to comfortably save money from every paycheck. Story 140. I learned more skills while working in the trades. I switched among different builders until I found one that paid what the work was worth. I went from sweeping floors in a warehouse making $250 a week to making over $100,000 a year in just 6 years. Story 141. Honestly, it's a mindset. Even when I made 1/4 of what I make now, I was not living paycheck to paycheck. I did during college, but since then it has been all about discipline and strict budgeting. Story 142. I changed careers and started earning more money. My salary more than doubled at my first job in that field. I went from being an underpaid graphic designer to a software engineer. Having more money meant we could get ahead on our bills and have extra left over. Story 143. For me, it was earning more money, not a lot, while keeping my expenses the same. Over time, the gap between my income and my spending grew significantly and gave me much more breathing room. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.